Delta Airlines Flight 1732 took off from Miami shortly after 11 p.m. Destination, Chicago. First class was separated from economy class by a thick navy blue curtain. The interior was dimly lit, and the aroma of fresh coffee and gourmet meals mingled with the cool air conditioning. The constant hum of the engines was like a lullaby for the passengers after a long day. Before we get into the story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Now let's continue where we left off. Miami Heat star Jimmy Butler was seated in seat 3A by the window. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt, comfortable sweatpants, and sneakers from his own line. He could still feel the fatigue from the game against the Knicks. The hard-fought away victory with a score of 109-98 had left a sweet sense of peace despite his tired muscles. Under his t-shirt, there was a small silver cross hanging from a delicate chain. It wasn't flashy, but it was meaningful. It was a gift from his mother on his 16th birthday, and it had been around his neck in every game, every important moment. For him, it was more than just a religious symbol. It was a window to his childhood, his family, and the prayers he had said in church on Sunday mornings. As he reviewed the game statistics on his tablet, someone approached from the middle aisle. Jessica Miller was an experienced flight attendant who had been working at Delta for 25 years. With her perfectly styled brown hair, ironed blue uniform, and automatic professional smile, she was a master at her job in first class. Approaching Jimmy, she asked, "Good evening. Would you like something to drink before takeoff?" "Water, please," replied Jimmy, smiling as he closed his tablet. At that moment, Jessica's eyes fell on the cross. For a moment, her gaze froze, and her expression hardened almost imperceptibly. A few minutes later, she returned with mineral water and ice. "Here you are," she said politely, placing the glass on the armrest. Then she leaned forward slightly and added in a lower voice, "You know, people like you usually carry religious symbols more discreetly. Perhaps it would be better to tuck it under your shirt during the flight." Not only Jimmy, but also a marketing manager sitting next to him and Jen Davis, a well-known travel influencer in seat 2A, had heard this sentence. Jen took out her phone and started recording the conversation. Jimmy was stunned. He held the cross in his hands and lifted it slightly. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice calm but clear. "This necklace is very special to me. I don't understand why I should hide it." Jessica continued to smile, but her eyes were as cold as ice. "I understand, ma'am, but we have rules that first class must be a neutral environment. Other passengers may be disturbed." Jimmy frowned. "Is that company policy?" "I've never heard of that before," he said. Jessica said in an even more formal tone, "Celebrities should not impose their beliefs on others." The cameras were now recording even more carefully. Jimmy was as cool outside as he was inside. "With all due respect," he said, his voice firm and measured, "I'm not imposing anything on anyone. This symbol is part of my faith, and I've never hidden it. I don't intend to hide it now." Jessica straightened up. "Privileged athletes think they're above the rules," she whispered coldly, and walked away. Silence fell on the plane. A few passengers turned their heads and looked at Jimmy, some hurriedly putting their phones away. Jimmy sighed and took his phone, typing a short message. "Just had a strange situation. I'll tell you when I land in Chicago. I love you." Neither he nor Jessica had any idea that the 47 seconds of tension they had just experienced would soon turn into a storm that would reverberate around the world. The next morning, in Chicago's Bronzeville neighborhood, Jimmy opened his eyes in the dim light of his hotel room. As usual, his first move was to reach for his phone. He squinted at the screen. But this morning was different. 47 unread WhatsApp messages, 124 Twitter notifications, countless Instagram tags and notifications. His eyes widened in shock. The last time he had seen numbers like that was after his All-Star performance. "What's going on?" he muttered to himself. The first message was from his manager. "A video of what happened on the plane yesterday is going viral. Call me immediately." Without even taking a sip of his coffee, he hurriedly clicked on the link on his phone. The video had been uploaded to TikTok by a travel influencer named Jen Davis. Exactly 47 seconds. A perfect angle. Clear audio. The moment Jessica said, "Hide your religious symbol," Jimmy's reaction, the silence, the phone cameras, the tension. Within hours, the video had reached 3.4 million views. The comments were pouring in. Who is this attendant? How dare they say that to Jimmy? This is blatant religious discrimination. Butler's calmness is legendary. I would have lost my temper. The respect Jimmy hashtag was trending. Jimmy quietly placed his phone on the table. He took a deep breath. This was a crisis, but it was also a test of character. At that moment, in Chicago's uptown neighborhood, Jessica Miller's alarm went off at 6:15 a.m. Normally on holidays, she would pick up the newspaper, drink her coffee, and then go for a walk in the park. But that morning, nothing was normal. Her phone was vibrating on the table. Her inbox was exploding. There were hundreds of comments on her email, Instagram, Facebook, and even her LinkedIn profile, which she hadn't used in years. The first message from a friend read, "Jess, are you okay? Everyone is talking about you. The video has gone viral." Jessica's heart was pounding. "What video?" she muttered in a trembling voice. 3 minutes later, she was watching her own face on her phone. The sentence she had said in a calm voice, "You should wear religious symbols more discreetly." Hearing her own voice made her feel sick. The comments scrolled down the screen, most of them angry. "Who are you to tell someone to hide their faith? This woman should be fired. Disgraceful. An insult to all Christians." Jessica slumped into a chair. She felt a pain in her chest. Panic, regret, fear, all of them overwhelmed her at once. The phone rang again. It was Delta Human Resources. When she answered, the voice on the other end was cold and formal. "Ms. Miller, your flight assignments have been suspended pending the completion of an investigation into the incident reported on social media. Please do not speak to the press." She didn't say a word. She just shook her head, but no one saw. At that time, Jimmy had gone to a youth basketball camp in Chicago, as promised. Children excitedly surrounded him on the sidelines, taking turns asking him for autographs and questions. But something was different. Cameras, reporters, flashes. "Jimmy!" someone called out as he was drinking water. "What do you think about the flight attendant? Did you feel like you were attacked?" Jimmy looked at the children around him, then at the microphones. "I came here today for these kids," he said in a determined voice. "As for yesterday's incident, everyone deserves respect for who they are and what they believe in. It's that simple." When he returned to the hotel, his manager was waiting for him. He was holding a thick file. TV show offers, interview invitations, sponsorships, Good Morning America, The Today Show, even a few Christian brand partnerships. "You can go on TV whenever you want. It will be great for your image," said the manager excitedly. Jimmy took the file and closed it without opening it. "I'm not interested," he said in a low but clear voice. "This situation has gotten out of hand. The woman made a mistake, but I don't want her life to be ruined." His manager paused. This was an unexpected response. For Jimmy Butler, this wasn't just a crisis. It was a turning point in his character. Everyone who knew him knew he wasn't someone who played to the cameras. Whenever he stepped into the spotlight, it was always for a reason. And in this case, the reason was not for show, but for what was right. At the same time, in an apartment in Chicago's uptown neighborhood, Jessica Miller sat slumped in her chair, her hands clutching her hair, her face white. She asked herself the same question over and over again. I just said one sentence. How did it get so big? But deep down, she knew the answer. It wasn't just that moment, but years of pent-up anger, insecurity, and hurt that had manifested themselves in that cross symbol. In fact, it wasn't a reaction to Jimmy, but to her own past. The phone vibrated again. This time it was her sister, Rachel. Jessica hesitated for a moment, but then answered. "Jess, are you okay? I saw the video." "Who hasn't seen it?" Jessica said, her voice cracking. Rachel was silent for a moment. "What happened to you? This isn't you." "I don't know. For a moment when I saw that cross, I felt like I was back in my childhood. Back to those days when I was constantly being judged, the strict rules of the church, the feeling of being rejected." Jessica's voice was trembling. "But Jimmy wasn't one of those people," said Rachel. "I know," Jessica whispered. "I wasn't judging him. I was judging my own past, and I was wrong." Rachel's voice softened, but remained firm. We all act based on the chains of our past sometimes, but what matters is what you do when you realize you're chained. Jessica didn't say anything for a while. She hung up the phone. She got up and looked in the mirror. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her face was filled with shame, but she felt something burning inside her like a spark, the desire to change. At that moment, Jimmy was in the breakfast room with his teammates. The cameras were still following him, but now everyone was wondering the same thing. "Jimmy, what are you going to do now?" He ran away from the cameras and threw himself onto the small veranda at the back of the hotel. He leaned back against a chair. He looked up at the sky. The voice inside him was clear. Not revenge, kindness, not punishment, dialogue. Just then, his manager approached him with his cell phone. "You have a message," he said. It was sent through one of Jessica's contacts in the hotel industry. "What does it say?" "She wants to talk, face to face." Jimmy took the phone. The message was short and to the point. "If it's okay with you, I'm ready to talk. I think there are things we can both learn." Jimmy studied the message carefully. He didn't hesitate for a moment. "Yes," he whispered. "This conversation needs to happen." A day later, Jessica was walking in Jefferson Park in Chicago. The trees rustled in the wind, and birds sang, but she was in a different world. Every phone notification made her heart skip a beat, and every message left a scratch on her soul. As she walked, her phone vibrated again. This time, it was her old friend Derek, another flight attendant she had worked with for a long time. "Jessica." "Derek, I saw what happened. Be honest, how do you feel?" Jessica took a deep breath. "My head is spinning. I was angry, but I shouldn't have taken it out on him. When I saw that cross, all the pain from my childhood came flooding back. And you threw that moment in his face," Derek said, not with hurt, but with empathy. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I made a mistake, but I know I can't forgive myself." "Maybe it's not about forgiveness. Maybe this is a moment of growth," Derek said. "And growth is usually painful." Just then, Jessica's phone vibrated again. It was a new message. From Jimmy Butler. "I'm ready to talk. Want to meet up?" Jessica stared at her phone screen for a long time. Her heart began to race. "This isn't just an apology," she thought. "This could be my chance to break the chains that have held me back." The phone screen went dark, and then lit up again. Jimmy's message was still there. Below it was a small note. "Tomorrow morning at 10:30, Lo Mio restaurant in Little Havana. A quiet, simple place. If you're ready." Jessica took a deep breath. She couldn't sleep that night. Even if she wanted to, when she closed her eyes, all she could see was the moment on the plane and the video that followed. That moment, the seconds when everything changed. At 9:45 a.m., she was waiting in front of the restaurant. The simple beige blouse and dark blue pants she was wearing had been carefully chosen. But no matter how calm she looked on the outside, she was a storm inside. She looked at herself in the restaurant window one more time. "You're going to face it," she said to her reflection. "Your past, and someone who knows you better than you know yourself." Lo Mio was a simple yet warm place offering a unique blend of Italian coffee and Cuban cuisine. Rustic paintings adorned the walls, and handmade ceramic plates sat on the tables. There was a sense of peace in the air, but Jessica felt more tension than peace. She opened the door. The attendant at the entrance pointed to the back corner. Jimmy Butler was sitting alone in the corner, wearing a plain t-shirt and jeans. There were 2 coffees and a pitcher of water on the table. There was no judgment in his eyes, just a ready and determined expression. Jessica approached slowly. Jimmy stood up, smiled, and extended his hand. "Welcome, Jessica." "Thank you for inviting me," said Jessica, shaking his hand. They sat down at the table. There was a moment of silence. Only the sound of coffee being poured into cups could be heard. Accompanied by soft music, Jimmy began. "I see this meeting not as a rematch, but as a conversation. I want to listen to you, because whatever happened that day, I felt there was a deeper story behind it." Jessica replied without looking away. "At that moment, when I saw that cross, something triggered inside me. It was as if all the harsh words I had heard years ago, all the feelings of rejection, came flooding back. But none of that had anything to do with you. You were just carrying the wrong symbol at the wrong time for me." Jimmy nodded, understanding. You know, this cross isn't just a symbol of faith for me. It's a gift my mother gave me on my 16th birthday. It's a part of my family, my values, my childhood. It was there at every game, every tough moment. It was with me on the plane, and I never even thought about hiding it. Jessica swallowed. I'm glad to hear that, really, because for years, I thought symbols like that hurt me, but it turns out the pain comes from people's actions, not symbols. They were silent for a moment. The waiter brought them refills of coffee. Jimmy thanked him, then turned his eyes to Jessica. Social media hit you hard. Extremely, she smiled bitterly. I paid the price for my own judgments, but what hit me the most was the maturity you showed. You never put me down. On the contrary, your silence held up a mirror to me. Jimmy bowed his head slightly. Because I wanted to speak with empathy, not anger. You made a mistake, yes, but so did I. I had no right to judge you without knowing your past, but now we're listening to each other, and I think that's worth much more than any apology made in front of millions of people. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I want this incident to be a lesson not only for me, but for the entire industry. I spoke with Delta. I suggested that they launch a training program for flight attendants on trust and respect for cultural differences. I really want to make a difference. Jimmy, with genuine admiration in his eyes. That's it. That's what we've been looking for. Learning from mistakes and doing good. Jessica smiled. Her tears now held hope. What about you? She asked. What will you do about this? Jimmy paused for a moment. Maybe I'll speak up. Maybe I'll just share how I feel. But whatever I do, it won't be to bring you down. It'll be to lift you up. Because falling is easy, but getting up requires a helping hand, and I want to be the one to offer that hand. It was almost 12:30. For 2 hours, they talked about the past, their wounds, their beliefs, and forgiveness. An unexpected bond had formed between them. A journey that began with a mistake ended with two people discovering their humanity. Jimmy smiled before leaving. We should do this again, not just to talk about the past, to support each other. I would like to, said Jessica. I really would. Thank you, Jimmy. As he walked out the door, Jimmy turned and nodded slightly. Remember, everyone makes mistakes, but what matters is who you are because of those mistakes. Jessica stepped outside. The sun was smiling in the sky. For the first time, she could look directly into his eyes. For the first time, she could feel the light behind the shadows. The people passing by on the street were ordinary. No one recognized her, and no one lingered on her gaze. But for Jessica, that morning was different, because the weight inside her had lifted. She was no longer just a flight attendant. She was someone who had learned to grow from her mistakes. The next day, she was at Delta Airlines headquarters. When those inside saw her, there was a brief silence. Some averted their eyes. Some looked at her curiously, but Jessica walked forward with her head held high, her file tucked under her arm. She had a lot to say. When she entered the meeting room, managers from Human Resources and Training were waiting for her. The coffee was fresh, and eyes were attentive. Jessica sat down, took a deep breath, and began to speak. What has happened in recent days is not solely my fault. It is a reflection of a shortcoming that we have all overlooked. We have no guidance on cultural and religious sensitivities. I want to fill that void. She opened her presentation. The slides had simple but powerful headlines. Empathy, diversity, respect, silent prejudices. The managers listened attentively. Throughout the presentation, it was clear that not only Jessica but also the entire system was growing. At the end of her speech, there was no fragility in her voice, only determination. I made a mistake, but now I want this mistake to teach not only me, but also others. That day, something changed at Delta. Jessica's proposed program was approved. Cultural awareness and respect training was planned to be piloted on a few routes before being rolled out to the entire cabin crew. During this process, Jimmy Butler was quiet on his end, but he was watching. One morning, as he sat on the porch of his home in Miami, an email caught his attention. From Delta Airlines Public Relations. Subject: Training Program Introduction. Content: Details of the new program prepared by Jessica Miller and an invitation to the opening speech. Jimmy smiled. "This is it," he muttered. "This is why it's worth talking about." On the day of the opening, the room where the training seminar was held was silent. Among the guests were a few members of the press, senior executives, and several flight attendants. When Jessica took the stage, there was no trace of her old expression on her face. What she carried was no longer a burden, but a responsibility. At the end of her speech, she put down the microphone and noticed someone sitting in the back row of the room. Jimmy Butler. Their eyes met. Jimmy stood up, but didn't approach her. He just bowed his head. Jessica smiled. They understood. Everything had been said. Even the silence was enough. A few weeks later, Jimmy was speaking at an event where he met with young people at the invitation of a charity organization. When he picked up the microphone, he thought back to that moment on the plane, Jessica's face, the calmness within her. Then he smiled and said, "Sometimes life gives us moments that seem small, but have a profound impact. A word, a glance, a silence. And those moments don't just test you, they build you. I'm not here today because of basketball alone. It's also because of my mistakes, confrontations, and forgiveness." One of the young people asked, "What about what happened on the plane? Are you still angry?" Jimmy paused for a moment. Then he replied, "Anger is a temporary fire, but forgiveness is like a light that illuminates you from within, and I chose that light." After that day, neither Jessica nor Jimmy continued their lives in the same way. Jessica was no longer just someone who followed instructions, but a guiding voice. Jimmy, on the other hand, was a leader not only on the field, but also off it. Quiet, but powerful. Influencing without shouting, changing without getting angry. This journey, which began with a mistake, opened the doors to both individual transformation and social learning. Because sometimes a cross is more than just a symbol. Sometimes a plane is more than just a mode of transportation. And sometimes a person can carry not just themselves, but others as well. If you were on that plane, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to share this story with your loved ones so it can inspire others.